When you think of open world games, these three come to mind. 10 years ago it was GTA, Mafia and Saints Row, and a few other franchises like Just Cause hovering about. But now GTA, Mafia and Watch Dogs are the faces of this subgenre in open world games. Here's the tricky part. GTA has great games across the board. Mafia has two masterpieces. Watch Dogs might be the odd one out for many, but when you just look at pure gameplay, it gets really competitive. Let's have some fun and find the better and in turn the king of open world games set in the modern world. GTA has always been immensely popular yet underappreciated. The series might be a household name, but when you ask real gamers, that's in air quotes by the way, rarely will anyone admit that GTA is their favorite game. They'll go with Skyrim or The Witcher or RDR, but never GTA, because it's considered as a game for non-gamers. Anyone in the world can load up GTA 5 with no prior gaming knowledge and have fun for a couple of hours. That quality might be the biggest reason why the series is so popular. But the downside of kind of pandering to the mainstream audience is it doesn't go well with real gamers, again air quotes. If GTA 5 had come out with a different name, it would have been appreciated beyond belief. It wouldn't have sold as much as it did, but the reception would have been quite different. The early games in the series are so far ahead of their competitors. I mean, GTA San Andreas and 3 amaze me with how incredible they were, especially considering how old they are. These games don't necessarily have one strength that you can point to. They are great across the board. Sure, sometimes they could have been more ambitious, but the lack of any glaring strengths or weaknesses for that matter is something. Mafia and GTA have a nice rivalry going back almost 20 years. GTA 3 is considered as one of the most revolutionary games ever. It's kind of the prototype for open world games. But Mafia 1 was equally revolutionary in my opinion, in its way of storytelling, realism and just the way the game feels. The sense of danger at every turn. Tommy, the protagonist in Mafia 1, never felt like a superhero unlike GTA games, and that was refreshing in the video game industry. Mafia 2 and GTA 4 went head to head, and in my opinion Mafia 2 is just miles ahead. That's a pretty big feat considering GTA 4 was no slouch. It was a really good game. Mafia 3 was not good, to put it lightly. The game didn't feel like a Mafia game at all. It felt more like a GTA than a Mafia. Gameplay didn't change all that much, it looks decent, but it just lacks the charm that made the series so great. Watch Dogs didn't earn its name. It took GTA and Mafia a game or two to come out of the shadows, but not Watch Dogs. The first installment in the series was one of the most anticipated games ever. It was actually supposed to go against GTA 5 and be better. In fact, it was to be released almost at the same time as GTA 5. But after a few delays, the game came out to a disastrous reception. I was firmly on the hype train, and I might be in the minority, but for me the game actually matched my expectations. I did realize it didn't look great, but that didn't matter all that much to me. Fast forward a few years, the sequel came out. It was relatively low profile compared to the first one, and surprisingly it was well received. The game was completely different from the first one. The only thing in common is hacking and combat to a lesser degree. Ubisoft ran away from everything, a brooding protagonist, a murky city, a serious tone, and it was a fairly successful attempt as well. Most gamers welcomed the change, but I loved the way the first one felt. I loved Aiden, the tone, and the city of Chicago. The third one was even more different or ambitious depending on the person you ask. The play as anyone gimmick was just that, a gimmick, and a nice way to avoid an interesting narrative. Again, this change was welcomed by some and dismissed by others. Ubisoft really stepped up on their good areas and made it even better, but they didn't really attempt to fix any persistent problems in the series. GTA games are centered around being fun, and that sometimes means gameplay elements are a little too simple, but GTA games will never be known for having creative, out-of-the-world gameplay elements. What Rockstar do really well is focus on making everything functional, focusing on the little details, and I'm sure they test these games a lot because there are rarely any noteworthy problems. Sure, they do play it safe sometimes, but they somehow innovate just enough to keep up with other games and also avoid anything that can be potentially game-breaking. Because if you try to do a lot of things, there's a possibility you might end up doing nothing right. From driving to combat to even the story, they won't blow you away, but they work. Cars do float a little, guns do sometimes feel like toys, and the story might be near non-existent. That's the worst case scenario. 90% of the time their games are a smooth ride with no frustrating parts. GTA 5 is the best in the series for me. San Andreas is a close second. Every other game is at least good or better. These games have no problem letting realism take the backseat for a while. You never run out of bullets after the first few missions. The absurd amount of in-game weapons you can carry at once are things that other games might restrict to keep realism intact, but not GTA. I generally love the way Rockstar handled realism. In a game like RDR, which is supposed to be brutally realistic, cleaning your weapons and all, there's still over-the-top stuff going on. When you get past the main thing, which is basically driving up and down from shooting galleries, there's a lot going on. Tennis, golf, poker, triathlons, races, betting events, and much more that I'm sure I'm missing. This part of the game, side activities and such, are overlooked. According to many, the only side activity in GTA games are 5-star police chases. I mean, GTA 5 had in-game theaters with movies playing. How awesome is that? Unnecessary, but awesome nonetheless. Mafia games aren't exactly known for their gameplay. Cars in Mafia Definitive Edition were so uncontrollable, they were labeled realistic in relation to the cars of that time period. Maybe that was intentional or maybe it wasn't, but going by that track record, I don't think it is. The series has always been kind of sloppy gameplay wise. Driving on snow in Mafia 2 was hard, that's alright, but it wasn't any easier on dry land either. Mafia 3 might actually be the most well-rounded in the gameplay department. I had fun with the countless enemy camps you had to clear out. Both the stealth and carnage approach were fun. But the game was brutally repetitive. That's more of a mission structure problem than a gameplay problem, but still. I'm making it sound like gameplay is unbearable. It's really not. It's average, but it does its job of taking you through the highlight, the story. Watch Dogs, as I've said countless times, has incredible third-person combat. Weapons feel like dangerous machines rather than toys. They have weight and power behind them. Combine that with powerful realistic effects and they become incredibly fun. Aiden plays as important a role as the weapons themselves. His movement, parkour, and how effortlessly controllable he is make combat better. Driving, on the other hand, is typical open world games. There's some things that some games can never seem to get right. Hair in sports games most often is never up to par, environmental effects in racing games are low quality, and in open world games driving and melee combat to a certain degree never seem to work. It's made by Ubisoft, so icons and activities all over the map, and surprise surprise, many of them are unoriginal and repetitive. For example, enemy hideouts. They are as basic as side activities can get. But here's the kicker. I played through every hideout, not just once, but multiple times because of how awesome combat felt. There are some other things to do as well, chess puzzles, street hustlers, and the usual races and stuff. So there's a fair bit of things to do, but enjoying them or not totally depends on the person. They aren't objectively good or bad. So here's a fun section. How good are these games at being who they are? For example, if it's a Just Cause game, how enjoyable is wreaking havoc? That sort of stuff. Grand Theft Auto is supposed to be a series about, well, Grand Theft Auto and all the other forms of theft. But I look at these games like a sitcom based on criminals. Every other cutscene will make you laugh, like Michael ending up in a morgue, or Michael and Franklin pulling a house off a hill, or anything with Trevor in it. And that's just GTA 5. Rockstar intended GTA to be a satire, and that's exactly what it is. Every character is some or the other stereotype, from exaggerated accents to just mimicking real life. These games are great at being what they are. Mafia games are all about a gritty, realistic look inside organized crime. The series is intense all throughout, but Mafia 1 had a civilian entering that world, and it was intense to say the least. Vito, the protagonist of Mafia 2, was slightly higher ranking, and that gave us a different experience. Mafia 3 tried something new with the whole siding with characters thing. It should have worked, but it didn't. But the first two games really capture the intensity and danger of that world really well. Watch Dogs was basically supposed to be an open world centered around hacking. All three games have completely different approaches. The first one is a revenge, more personal story. The second is a somewhat funnier look at our own world, and the third one is a full-on dystopian future game. I think all three approaches work to a certain degree, but Watch Dogs 1 and Legion had the more interesting tone to them. Hacking mechanics have gotten better over the years with more things to do and control, but there's still so much that could be done. The series has kind of become an open world third-person shooter rather than what it was intended to be. I'm going to go with GTA because the series has 4 great games and no bad ones really, but even then Mafia is a close second, because Mafia 1 and 2 might be the best games between these 3 franchises. I think GTA 5, Mafia 1, San Andreas, Mafia 2 and Watch Dogs 1 are my top 5 if I had to pick, well, my top 5 between the 3 series. If you had watched my ranking every game I've played video, you know they are at the top somewhere there as well. If you want to support the channel, become a Patreon member, like, dislike, share, subscribe, comment. Thanks for watching and have a great day.